Okay, we're going to continue with firewalls and Lab 4, and we're going to go through our walkthrough on that. We're going to need our PFSense updated, which we did in the last video, our package installs for Squid and SquidGuard. We're going to need to know a little bit of proxy, and we're going to need to understand where to set those proxies through Internet options, and that's native to Windows. We still have our same setup through our VM NAT to allow for maximum portability through DHCP on our NAT interface. In a production setting, that would typically be static set, but for our purposes, taking it on a drive, moving it from point A to point B, desktop, laptop, school, we like to set it to DHCP. Still using PFSense, but we're going to add in some proxy server as well. The DHCP server is on our /24 CIDR value on a 10.0.0.0.0 subnet. And Windows will edit as our client through which will be receiving DHCP addressing. So first thing we've done is updated PFSense. We've installed our packages Squid and SquidGuard, and we'll look at lab actions 1 and 2. Lab action 1, as a test, you should add the blacklist hccs.edu website. We need to be aware of how DNS works, and we need to show documentation or steps for blocking the HCCS fully qualified domain name. So we need to make sure that the Windows virtual machine, our client, can't access www.hccs.edu. There is another way to access that website. We'll need to figure that out. Use DNS for that, and the additional steps you'll need to show blacklisting to occur. So make screenshots or proof that you did that. The second lab action we're going to continue on is our network administrator role or firewall administrator role for coolparts.com. That management has said that maybe blocking all web traffic was a mistake. Instead, they've identified the culprit as youtube.com, a time waster. They want to basically improve productivity. They've asked you to use PFSense, not just the firewall, but any applications that can block YouTube. So show your details on how you use Squid to block YouTube. And let's go ahead and get started. So here we are in our virtual machine. We have our PFSense loaded, and our version, I know that my name says 2.4.2. It's now 2.4.4 after our update. So we can rename that. Let's go back to our home. We can rename, all right, fine, let's exit full screen. We can rename this now as 2.4.4_2. That's our current version. So that's a nice thing. We don't have to change our host name or anything crazy. We can just show our case as an administrator if we had our main machine managing our network in this particular management style through Workstation or Essex or any VMware style product. We can just rename it to showcase our updated version number. So if we ever had a question, we needed to see it without logging in, without checking our statics, our settings here on our site by logging in. We can just quickly see it 2.4.4_2. Additionally, we could come into our site here 2.4.4_2 or release 2. We'll go back to full screen here. We'll get rid of that, and we will continue on. So the dashboard you can see has changed. All I added was the picture, and I added our service statuses. And I'll show you why here in a little bit, because it's quick to see. Right now we have CLAM antivirus disabled, DHCP is enabled, gateway monitoring enabled, times enabled, Squid proxy disabled, and SquidGuard disabled. You could start them here and here if you wanted to, or reload any services if there's a problem. But for the most part, we're going to do that manually as we go through our setting. We've upgraded our RAM to 1 GB. Just by adding in proxies, we've seen an increase from our previous, which I think was around 13% to now 30%. So the services do add a little bit of use. We've had uptime for 49 minutes. It's running on virtualized 6th generation i7. And so we'll start with our proxy setup. Right now we're on a dashboard with all our widgets. And the picture logo is pretty cool, I think. If you were installing PFSense, because it is OpenSense, so the cost is very minimal, You just have to find a machine to run it. Adding a logo like this, if you are a contract or a contractor, or maybe you are an entrepreneur and you start this service for a client, you could add their logo there, and it sort of adds a wow factor. Other than that, I think it's pretty neat. So we'll take a look at our services. We now have Squid Proxy, Squid Reverse Proxy, and SquidGuard Proxy Filter. So the first step we need to do is use our proxy. Right now on our internet services, we are not using a proxy. So there's a couple of things we need to learn here with proxies and how proxies work. They're sort of a go-between between your client and the internet. You don't want to give them unfettered internet access. You want to be able to limit what's appropriate for a work style setting. At home, you probably don't have a need to, unless maybe you have children, you don't want them to get on certain websites. You could buy, I mean, it's not a default. It's not, Windows has some things, but it's not the greatest, right? Because there's all these sorts of ways to get around them. You could install net nannies type internet blocking sites. You could go into your router and maybe they have some sort of little niche that you can use. It's not entirely as full scale as we'll see what we'll use here. So keep this in mind because we're going to come back to this in a little bit. Right now, Squid Proxy is disabled. Before you can enable it, you need to start the settings that are important for it to run. Additionally, we'll look at proxy port 3128. That's the default port that you'll be listening to. Captive portal was removed. It's a bug. So you can see that as well. And IPv4 and IPv6, if you need to enable that, that may come as a option later. If you want to disable the ICMP pinger, you can do that as well. Transparent mode to forward all requests. It's used to without configuring proxy information on clients. When you do that, you'll need to enable HTTPS because now HTTPS is kind of all over the place. And you do that by the secure site listing. However, to do so, you'll need to include a certificate authority. All right, so you'll have to go in and create a certificate manager and you'll have to create SSL and do all that as well. For the most part, we're gonna that's just important information to know. Our visible host name is localhost, so you could actually go to Windows and ping localhost. And if we wanted to suppress the Squid version, when we reach those error versions, you'll see the error version come up here shortly. Additionally, you can make a little bit of fun changes to the HTML. If you're good at HTML coding or aware of how to use HTML, you can go in and actually edit that, which we'll probably do at a later lab. So we'll come over to local cache, and for the most part, everything stays default. The catch here is that we need to look at our cache size. It's what we're going to use for cached objects. Right now we're using 100 megs. For a single client, that's okay. That's not a large cache size. For multiple clients, depending on how many, 500, 5,000, this would need to increase because the cache would fill up very, very rapidly. Here's where you can find the cache location and you can find how big the minimum size for the objects and the maximum size. So 4 megs to 0 is our sweet spot there. We can dedicate how much megs of RAM, and 64 megs on our 1 terabyte of RAM, or the maximum size in RAM, 256 out of our 1 terabyte. We can also use dynamic caching, which helps with things like Windows Update. So we could set our Squid to help proxy out all Windows updates. So if you have one Windows client, which we do, this is our Windows client. Let's come back up here and make it show up. There we are. So if we had several hundred clients here, updating them all at once on Patch Tuesday would be very it would create a huge impact to our system or our network. Doing this means that the update is downloaded once and it's stored here on our proxy, Squid proxy server. The good thing about that is now those 500 or 5 clients or 5,000 clients now download it from our Squid or our PFSense firewall. It's cool because the internal network is going to be faster than our outbound internet connection. So the download speeds at your home may be 35, 55, 100, 200, 500, or maybe even a gigabyte, gigabit LAN speeds are really great internal to the network, but in the wild we see some sort of slowdown, especially if multiple clients are downloading at the same time. We could see a huge impact of that network. Doing dynamic caching helps a lot. So with our cache settings pretty much set to default because I only have one client, we'll save those settings. We'll see our little window spin, and we'll get rid of this guy real quick. Now our local cache is set. We can come over to our proxy, and we can enable our Squid proxy to our LAN interface on proxy port 3128. All right, all Squid services are disabled and stopped if unchecked. So right now this service is not started. So we're going to save it. All right, so now you can see that this has changed to restart and stop. We have a proxy running. We can go over to our set here, come over to our LAN, and we can set this in place. So just as a proof, accs.edu, we can go to our website that we had. It's HTTPS, and it does have a security certificate, okay? All right, so as it sits right now, we haven't blocked anything, but it's important to note we have remote cache, local cache, even antivirus through Clam AV. It's not enabled right now. We saw that on our dashboard. Now we see that Squid proxy service is enabled, but Clam antivirus is not. So we kind of installed 4 when you think about it. We did SquidGuard, Squid, Clam, and another service on reverse proxy with just those 2 installs. So it's showing why it's eating up a little bit more of our RAM. Now we're at 29%. We were at 30, 31 before. So we'll take a look at our services, and we will look at our Squid proxy server one last time. Offers the traffic management set so we can throttle our bandwidth for the peers on our network as well. We can also set individual users and username and passwords for our proxy. We can look at the real time and what's going on in our cache. We can look at our virus real-time hits, and we can look at our SquidGuard table and our Clam antivirus tables as well. So this is what's going on active right now. I think it's refreshed every so often, and we can sync our settings to an external package if we wanted to as well. And another important thing to note is, that'll come in our next service setting, our SquidGuard proxy filter. All right, so by default, they don't have anything in our, we'll look at the common access lists and our target rules. We have nothing. Everything's allowed, default access all. All right, so we'll need to look at our target categories, and we have nothing here. There's no target category. A really cool setting about this is if we decide to look up all blacklists, there's a group of people that have done this. All right, here's our blacklist. Maybe because the proxy is already running, so our proxy is already running, so we need to enable that now. So 10.0.0.1 is my default. It was delivered during our original setup, and the default 31.28. So we'll set our proxy in place, and we'll refresh our site unless there's a problem with that right now. I didn't go to this earlier. You can get blacklists from a million billion places. I really wanted to show the PFSense block. Let's try it again. I think there's a problem with their website currently. It's kind of odd. Or their SquidGuard domain is busted. So I didn't expect that, but you can get blacklists. I really didn't expect that since I visited it before. But there's listings of them, and you can actually load them. Maybe a temporary thing. And here's our SquidGuard error message. The connection failed. The connection was refused, so their side has a problem at the moment. But you can check that out. You can add that listing here to the URL through FTP, HTTP, or local URL, and it will basically grab that zip file and pull that up. Right now, our active list there's nothing running for SquidGuard, so we'll need to add that target category, and we'll do so by calling it blocked underscore sites, because you can't use a space. I'll show you what happens if you try there. The rule must be between 22 and 15 symbols, A through Z, underscore 0 through 9. So a space is not allowed. So we'll add our underscore domain hccs.edu, and we will save that. So now we have a block site in our target categories. When you load our blacklist URL or blacklist proxy, you also show up with a ton of categories. So right now no one's not allowed to use our block sites as it sits, because we don't really, that PFSense doesn't really know, because the target list block sites doesn't have an action applied to it. So we could whitelist, deny, or allow. If we whitelist it, then these sites become always allowed, but we want to deny our blocked sites from our target categories earlier. We can add error messages. We can add extra settings here. So the URL filter, this is what it is. It's a URL filter, or a proxy URL filter to be more specific. The IP addresses instead of fully qualified domain name, which is what we added. We can add in these error messages, blocked messages. We can redirect it to a particular URL. We can use additional help for mature content safe search engines. And we can also add logging as well. So we're going to just, as a set here, add this to our listing, and we can see it again. Block sites is the target rule, and we're going to deny that target category for hccs.edu. Our service is stopped right now, so there's two actions to start it. You have to start it, wait for it to finish loading. Oh, we got denied our own entry here. So come back to internet options. Nope, connections, settings. Come back to our services. our proxy filter. And we'll need to apply our settings here. On our common access list, we still have our block site to deny. And actually, default access is set to deny as well. So that's why we blocked. I must have fat fingered that. So our default access to all, we need to set to allow, because that's why we were blocked out of our 10.0.0.1. So that was an accident. Somehow I did that. Check our target rules, come back to our settings, and we'll apply, because even though the service is started, we need to apply the setting changes or the configuration changes. To activate those configurations, apply button must be clicked. So even though it's running, we must apply all prior settings. Now it's done, and remember, I am not using our proxy server at the moment. So if we do HCCS, we should get it. We did. When we come back and apply our proxy settings, now that everything's running, we can check our system. This is a quick check. We have proxy service and Squid service, they're both enabled. So now HCCS should be blocked, and it was not, so that was unexpected. Unless it's cached. It may be cached, so we'll close. There, so it was cached, so we'll go back in to Chrome and settings. Additionally, we'll look at proxy again real quick, and you can open proxy settings. You can get to the same thing by going through internet options or going through proxies. Cache, clearing cache. We will do all time and just clear all cache. So 44 megs browsing history, we're just going to clear that out. And we were denied. Target group is block site, client group is default. I'm 10.0.0.5, so on our logging, if we had turned that on, we would have seen our block site as well. So the second half of this is understanding how DNS works. So when we open up our inside, when we can see we're inside our PFSense domain 10.0.0.1. So I'm not on the host machine. I am on the client virtualized machine here, and we're going out through 10.0.0.1, then through my DHCP address, and then it'll go out through my internet address here. Additionally, you can check for certain things like proxy checks, and you can see if here. You can use proxy checkers. If I did that, it would show my IP address, but you can also see that proxy or that the proxy is working for the internal site here. We can see it there as well. But how do we get around proxies now? We need to understand that portion of our segment here. So we'll make this a little bit bigger. Yeah. So now we're in our command prompt, and we're going to ping hccs.edu, and it shows up at 34.231.181.4. The only reason that the HCCS request is timing out is not that the website isn't there. We saw it. It's not that the domain doesn't work. We went to it. It's that ICMP requests or ping commands are being rejected through the firewall, at the HCCS domain, the fully qualified domain name. So there's where we weren't able to reach it. And that IP address seems to have been changed. But here we are, we're able to access it. We would just need to use a different IP address or the IP address change. Got to spell it right. Our same practice can be applied here, going to ESPN.com. So it's up to you now to figure out how to associate that. There's several ways to do it to make sure that you also block IP addresses so that users on your network can't get around your firewall and your proxy. If your proxy is set in such a way that you are letting people get to sites that they weren't supposed to get to, then you have a problem. So we can still get to YouTube. That's the second half there. How do we get around YouTube, or how do we make our users unable to access YouTube? That's an important piece there. And I think one of the reasons I did so well is I resolved HCCS to IP addresses, an IP address, another IPv6 address, another IP address, another IP address, another IP address, another. So 8 when I did a DNS check. So one of the ways that I got around that, but this is for one individual site, is to do, was it diagnostics? I think it was so DNS lookup. On DNS lookup, I did hccs.edu. And I added aliases for all of these IP addresses. So when I went to the IP address earlier, it did not allow it to go through. So we'll check on some of these here. We basically shut it down through DNS here. And if you don't trust those, you can always use IPWhois and IPinfo at these particular websites, DNS stuff or private.dns stuff. You can look up more and add those aliases as well. So I have all these A records. I don't have any AAA, so I don't have any IPv6 settings, but I think that may be because we're not using it. Or we use, oh, that was ARP tables. This shows who's on our network right now. So there's a lot that we can learn through diagnostics. There's a lot that we can learn with our statuses. It can help build a more complete picture. Now, the challenge is with YouTube growing, with Google's machine growing, if you set certain IP addresses in place, what's to say that later on down the line, another IP address won't come up to further substantiate the load that Google or YouTube would be experiencing? So with HCCS, it will probably grow, but how common will that be? And this is just one thing. So what we want to do is go back after you're done. Look at your services. I went to 2 things. Go back to our proxy filter. Go back to our target categories. Get rid of any blocked sites. So also we should have mentioned our firewall rules. We removed any firewall rules that were there, and you can do that by using your trash, or you can disable your rules. But for the most part, we won't be coming back to that until we come up with a new reason to block ports. So our proxy server is enabled, and our reverse proxy was left by default, our SquidGuard proxy. We can also come to our rule lists here, and we can ignore it. When we go to our target categories and we delete that block site, it's no longer there. We'll save it. it should disappear from our rules list as well, and it did. So we have default access to all. Everything was being allowed. We come back to our general settings. We still have our proxy sets saying that it's a part of our target group block sites because this is what I wanted to point out. We did not apply any changes. So what's going on right now is all loaded through RAM. And there's a few ways we could do this. We could restart the service, or we could refresh the service by hitting apply here. We'll wait for this little circle guy to finish. And that's our SquidGuard error page. So now it's finished. Our SquidGuard error page, and we could change this to be specific. So now we'll come back over hccs.edu, and we have access again. So it's important to remember to click the apply button. I say it a few times because I've had a lot of students over the years that have forgotten the apply. They made through all these changes, they looked at it again, they redid the changes, and they just keep forgetting to hit apply. Additionally, restarting the service will refresh any target categories are set up as well. And basically, we want to set up a category. Now, by default, the target categories has nothing. The access common list shows up. So hopefully later on, when we get into more detail, the ability to add a blacklist URL will show up. I don't know why. This page is just dragging here. It looked like it was the domain had expired, but I couldn't tell you why that happened, as it's a very popular site. Everybody that uses SquidGuard does that. All right, so here we are set. We've done everything associated to that. Remember, we have to worry about Lab Action 1. We blocked the HCCS website. We did learn about fully qualified domain names and DNS and why DNS is important, and additional documentation for blacklisting the HCCS website. So at that point in time, I've showed you everything to do to block HCCS, including ways to block its IP address, because I did that DNS lookup. So you're an administrator. I keep misspelling administrator. I can't believe that. So you're the firewall network administrator. It's time for you to block YouTube only. So we won't use the firewall option. We'll use SquidGuard to block YouTube. Keep in mind that YouTube has a lot of DNS entries, and it's up to you to figure out how the best to do that. You can use the internet to help you with that, but keep in mind the internet may give an extra or not include all. So it's important to really do your research on that. One thing I wanted to talk about real quick, before you shut down your virtual machine, it's not recommended. Come on. All right, it's not recommended to come over and shut it down, because this is your virtual machine tools, and we haven't installed virtual machine tools. It is a package add-on that you can get. And we can use, and we probably will use this later. So our shutout, oh, I just paused it. That's okay, pausing is okay, it's different. So we'll have to wait for it to restore. Our settings, it's always a good idea to take snapshots. We'll call this after Squid. lab, because we did do some significant updates to get Squid to run, and I did not make a snapshot of that. Basically, here is our VM tools settings, and we'll see that right here. Here we are in Windows, and we can go and use the shutdown procedure, which is how you would normally shut down Windows, right? We're not going to do that. We're going to use VM tools to do that for us. So when we shut down this guest, we're going to see it shut down. That's the VM tools action. If we come over to one that's not in the middle of running and we power it off, what's running in the background here? Well, we don't necessarily know at this interface. We could check our top, and we could check our logs, and we could check see running services, but we wouldn't want to just pull the plug on this. So the correct way to shut it down, unless you're pausing it, is to halt the system number 6. We say, do we want to shut down? Yes, and we'll show it stopping all our packages. We show it shutting everything down. Our Windows machine shut down the way we would normally shut it down, but we used our upper VM tools settings for that. VM tools did install for us here anyways. So that's why the correlation from our shutdown, startup, suspend, restart, that's why that correlated to our Windows machine. And we'll see everything shut down here. That's all I have for everybody today. Now we have everything shut down. We can close our workstation, and we're ready to continue on with our next labs or answer questions that come with the next one.